Okay, good morning, everyone. Hmm. These chapters of Tanya that we are in are extremely practical. And that's what I love about them. The Alter Rebbe literally gives us techniques to combat our Yetzer Hara, step by step, very clearly. Interestingly enough, this chapter is chapter 28. Chapter 28 is the numerical value of Kayach, which means strength, gives us lots and lots of strength to combat the Yetzer Hara and serve Hashem with joy and love and fear. So, going into this chapter is not long, but very powerful and very practical. Um, Segueing from last chapter, actually, where the Alter Rebbe dealt with sadness or intrusive thoughts which disturb a person during his mundane daily activities, like during his workday, during his trips to the grocery store, just being involved with his daily life, not necessarily during Avodas Hashem per se, meaning like davening or learning. These are just thoughts that pop up periodically, involuntarily, and they might be cause for sadness, right? And then the Alter Rebbe takes that whole mindset and turns it on its head in the last chapter and says that actually these intrusive thoughts are a cause for joy because you have the opportunity of fulfilling the mitzvah that you should not follow your heart. And you can transform those thoughts and you can just be happy that you have that opportunity of not only transforming them, but let's say delaying the thought or desire or temptation by using a technique called iskafia, which we discussed last week and last chapter. Now, this chapter, chapter 28, the Alter Rebbe deals with intrusive thoughts, or we call them machshavas zares, strange thoughts, that come to a person during davening or learning. So you're involved in a spiritual pursuit. The Alter Rebbe brings davening and learning, but there are plenty other spiritual pursuits as well. But let's say you're in the middle of davening or learning, very common dilemma. You're trying to have kavana, and some intrusive thoughts come into your mind. One would think that this is a cause for sadness at this point. This sadness is justified, right? Because I'm trying to serve Hashem at this moment, and now these thoughts are coming in and disturbing me, keeping me from serving Hashem. So maybe sadness is justified, right? Because these thoughts are preventing me from serving Hashem. So the first tip that the Alter Rebbe gives us, the first technique that the Alter Rebbe gives us is don't try to be a tzaddik. Now, what does this mean, actually? Because part of the avodah of a tzaddik is to take these kind of thoughts and transform them. And actually, he's not transforming his own thoughts, he's transforming other people's thoughts. Because a tzaddik does not have his own machshava zaris. He does not think in sinful terms at all. So a person might think, oh, maybe let me take these thoughts and I will examine which midah this thought comes from, and I will try to transform the thought. So let's say, the Alter Rebbe gives the example. Let's say misguided love can be redirected to love of Hashem, or even misguided fear can be redirected to fear of Hashem. But Alter Rebbe says in this chapter that when these thoughts come to you in the middle of davening or learning, this is not what you should be doing, because this is the avodah of a tzaddik and not of a Benoni or a potential Benoni. Because the tzaddik has completely transformed their animal souls and can even elevate the thoughts of others. So a tzaddik is connected to other people via thought and can sense a sinful thought in somebody else and actually help him transform that. But that's the tzaddik's work, not your work. But for a Beinoni, says the Alter Rebbe, it would actually be foolish to engage. So first tip, don't engage. don't engage in this thought. And we're going to break it down what that means, not to engage. You should not try to make sense of the thought, nor determine the source of this thought coming to you. Now, you could think, okay, fine, this might make me a little sad that I'm having this thought and I can't even do anything with this thought, right? I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to engage with it. However, says the Alter Rebbe, even though it may seem to you that this could cause justified sadness, you should serve Hashem b'simcha, and the solution to these thoughts are to intensify your efforts in avodas Hashem. So in other words, we're not going to engage with the negative. We're going to intensify the positive, your davening and learning and spiritual pursuits. So here's a tool number one. Intensify the good. Don't deal with the obstacles. By intensifying the good, the obstacles will fall away, and we're going to understand why that is right now. So how can we do this actually? Here's this like thought, buzzing in your mind, keeping you from davening, keeping you from learning, keeping you from serving Hashem with joy, without joy, just keeping you from serving Hashem, right? And you're meant to not engage and intensify your efforts to serve Hashem. So how do you do this? So the Alter Rebbe tells us how. By remembering the battle of the two souls. So we have explained previously in Tanya that the distracting thoughts are coming from the left side of the heart, the animal soul, which is doing battle with the godly soul. Now we know that both the godly soul and the animal soul are constantly fighting over control of the mind. That is not only the battle place, it's not only the battlefield, but it is actually the prize. Who is going to control the mind? Will it be the godly soul, the nefesh halikis, or will it be the nefesh habahamis? And it's the nature of those fighting and wrestling that when one side becomes very determined to win, the other side gathers all its strength, intensifies its efforts, and becomes even more determined. So therefore, it's not a bad sign that you're getting all these disturbing thoughts that are standing in your way from serving Hashem. When the godly soul exerts itself and is determined to daven and serve Hashem properly, the klipa and the animal soul also becomes determined in equal proportion to distract you by dragging your mind into a foreign thought of its own. Because remember that the battlefield is the mind, right? So now, instead of thinking, oh, I'm worthless, my davening is worthless because look at all these thoughts that are coming in, right? A person could really fall into that trap. I don't even know how to daven. Look what's going on. I'm thinking this thought and that thought, and I don't have kavanah, and I'm trying to, serve Hashem, and I'm trying to learn Torah, and I'm trying to do some mitzvahs, and look what's happening. All these thoughts are coming into my mind. You hypocrite, and your grocery list, and your argument with your spouse, or your children. The Beinoni should not think that his davening is worthless, but on the contrary, because he is davening with proper kavanah, the animal soul is now determined to disturb him. And the animal soul is intensifying its efforts. So when you notice the animal soul really intensifying its efforts, it's a good sign. And that's why you shouldn't be sad, you should be happy. But what's the solution? So the Alter Rebbe tells us the response is to disregard the thoughts and to put more energy into the davening and serving Hashem itself. And because there are two souls, the thoughts of the animal soul do not invalidate the kavanah of the godly soul. See, we tend to think that, oh, I'm thinking this, so then my godly soul is not valid, right? But there are two concurrent forces trying to dominate your mind, trying to gain control of the battlefield. And they're both happening at the same time. It's our choice which one to choose, right? So it doesn't mean that it invalidates your davening or your serving Hashem. It doesn't mean you should just give up your hands in hopelessness, because that's exactly what the Yetzer Hara and the animal soul want you to do, and say, well, all these obstacles are standing in my way, so what I'm trying to do must be worthless. On the contrary, because they're worth so much, your efforts, that's why the animal soul is intensifying its efforts. The reason that they do interfere with each other is because the godly soul is enclosed into the animal soul, which can really draw it down. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that if you have machshava zaris during davening, that your davening is worthless. On the contrary. Now, before we actually get into the actual practical way of like getting rid of these thoughts, we can really take this parak of Tanya, and even though the Alter Rebbe does not say this explicitly in this parak, and he only refers to davening and learning, but this could be any kind of spiritual pursuit. You could be involved in miftzayim. You could be involved in visiting the sick. You can be involved in davening and learning too. And yet, these intruding thoughts get in our way. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. Who do I think I am? Other people are better, right? All these different thoughts that bring us down. Look at this obstacle standing in my way. Look at that obstacle standing in my way. I don't have enough resources. I don't have enough strength. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough whatever it is, right? So we have to remember, first of all, that when those thoughts come up, it's a sign that your efforts are really good and that you should intensify them. You should intensify them, and that your efforts are not worthless. They are worth everything. So now, what do we actually do with these thoughts buzzing in our mind? So we're trying to intensify the positive, right? But they're still buzzing along. So the Alter Rebbe says, when a foreign thought enters your mind, you should treat it as if you would treat a nudnik or a wicked heathen that comes to talk to you in the middle of your davening in order to disturb. Like, actually think of us as a physical person. Let's say you were in the middle of davening and someone comes to you and starts asking you stupid questions. If you answer one question, that person will ask another question, says the Alter Rebbe. So the solution is to ignore. In fact, the expression that the Alter Rebbe uses in this parak of Tanya is la'asais atzmei kecheresh lo yishma. Act as if you were deaf. Alter Rebbe's words in this parak of Tanya. Act as if you're deaf, as if you don't hear. In other words, ignore the nudnik. Because when you ignore the nudnik coming to ask you a million questions while you're in the middle of working or davening and learning, involved in spiritual pursuits, he'll give up. He'll give up. Same with the Yetzer Hara, same with the Machshava Zaris, same with the Nefesh HaBahamis. This Nefesh HaBahamis is like a foreign heathen coming to trip you up. He's a nudnik. So it says the Alter Rebbe, ignore him. Make as if you're deaf. Don't engage with it. Because sometimes the tool in Tanya is, engage, see what it is, reframe, ask yourself what the Nefesh HaLakis is talking about. No, in this case, when these thoughts come to you while you are serving Hashem, not during your mundane activities, the solution is to be deaf, to ignore, and to not engage with this nudnik. Why? Listen to this. The Alter Rebbe says, "Ki hamisabek imenuvel misnavel gamkein," because he who wrestles with a filthy person becomes soiled himself. There's a Yiddish expression called krichen in blotte, like crawling in the mud. So sometimes you just don't want to get dirty. You don't want to crawl in the mud. And therefore, the solution is to just completely ignore it, completely act as if you're deaf, not give any attention. And then that person disturbing you, or in the case of your machshava zaris, or obstacles, or the Yetzer Hara, or the Nefesh HaBahamis, will get the message eventually and move away. And then the Alter Rebbe actually ends this parak with a very interesting question. What if you've done all this, but you're still not able to remove the thoughts? What then? Like you really, really are trying to ignore and you're trying to intensify, like everything that Al Rebbe says in this parak, you're intensifying your efforts and you're ignoring the nudnik and you're just not engaging with the Nefesh Abaham's thoughts while you are serving Hashem, but the thoughts keep coming back. What to do then? Then, says the Alter Rebbe, when you've done everything you can, you should humble yourself before Hashem and ask for assistance from Hashem to have mercy on you like a son. Karachem av albanim, which means that you may not necessarily be deserving of his help, but because of our relationship, Hashem, that you are our father and we are your children, please help us get rid of these disturbing thoughts and obstacles and help us serve you with the fullest joy in our hearts. So this chapter is really short, but oh so powerful and practical. Does anyone have any questions? Or observations or examples?
I could do all of the above. So I thought, it's interesting because when I'm davening, I'm very relaxed because I'm doing something for me, really, to talk to God. And that's when every single amazing idea comes into my head. And then as soon
Yeah.
as I finished my davening, I cannot remember one of those things that disturbed my davening. So there's always this pull, like I wish I could have a piece of paper to write everything down, which of course you wouldn't because you're in the middle of davening. So it's like this, like, yeah. I mean, I try to fall into the words. That's what I try to do because I don't know how to like go back to the concentration. You know what I'm saying of davening.
So, it's you've brought up, I think everyone can resonate with that because it's either like disturbing thoughts or yes, I have this great idea. It all goes back to the issue of are we in control or is Hashem in control? So to write down ideas during davening might be a technique, but over here the Alter Rebbe says ignore the thoughts, and I would
Mhm.
venture to add trust that all the amazing ideas will come to you exactly when you need them. And that's called trusting in Hashem. Like I am talking to Hashem now. Imagine you were standing in front of the president or prime minister or whoever. You would not have a piece of paper to write down all your ideas, right? You would just say, well, too bad.
Mhm.
And this is a very interesting example because they're not necessarily thoughts that are sad thoughts. They're just, oh, got a great idea for, Nashal Achmanis this year. Or, oh yeah, I have this great idea for, the Purim Suda or whatever it is, right? So it's still machshava zaris. It's still strange because it's strange to your avodas Hashem where we're just speaking to Hashem.
Anna, so what is why wouldn't humble ourselves before Hashem before we do all this? Um, like why the second choice is
Mhm.
humbling before Hashem and not the first?
Well, because the Alter Rebbe gives you practical techniques of how to do it. Like Hashem wants our avodah, right? But if we really try, and I think it's a lesson for every situation, if we really try and we put our best foot forward and we try to get rid of the, you know, distracting thoughts and ideas that are trying to pull us into sadness, really, because a person can be pulled into sadness because he can think, well, look at me, like I can't even daven anyways. Like I'm trying to serve Hashem, but look what's happening. I'm worthless, right? So, firstly, the Alter Rebbe is reminding you that you're not worthless. It's actually a good sign because it means that the Yetzer Hara is also battling for the prize, right? So it shifts your perspective. But then, yeah, if you can't do it yourself, you've got to ask Hashem for help. Not a contradiction, really.
When you were teaching and you used the word iskafia, So this is the perfect example because my brain kept going back to I can't remember what a scoffy is. I feel stupid. Instead of concentrating on what you were saying, and then I had to sort of let it go and say, okay, I'll ask at the end of the class. I mean, it's like because
Iskafia is what is withstanding temptation for a moment, temporarily, just like delaying temptation, like withholding. Like you don't have to eat the chocolate cake. You could eat the carrot instead. That's called
so that
iskafia, as
so there's
opposed
like
to
three words.
ishapcha.
That's
Ishapcha
the
is transformation. Iskafia is
ishapia.
no ishapcha is
Ishapia
transformation. Hapcha,
is transfer.
transformation. That is avodas hatzadikim, by the way. That is the avodah of the tzaddik because he completely transforms. The avodah of iskafia is the avodah of the Beinoni who subdues the temptation, who withholds the temptation. But we spoke about iskafia last chapter with regards to distracting thoughts that happen during the day, like involuntarily, not while you're serving Hashem, right? The thoughts that the Alter Rebbe is speaking about today in this chapter is about the thoughts that come up specifically while you are engaged in serving Hashem. And this technique is not iskafia. This technique is you are deaf. Act as if you are deaf. Ignore the nudnik.
So this is for the davening time. It's not
So
referring to the
either
entire.
davening or learning or any
Mhm.
avodas Hashem that you are engaged in.
How's the
But it's
difference
not your,
during the
it's
day?
not
Like if
your,
you are
it's
to
not
work.
your, if you're in the supermarket or you're engaged in your line of work or you're engaged in your profession or you're just, cooking or going shopping or just doing mundane activities that we have to do in order to live. Because in that case, the thoughts that come up are like sinful thoughts, temptation, pursuit of pleasure, right? So in that case, it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing that, right? Maybe instead of getting up and, going to work, maybe I should go back to sleep, right? But in this case, it's like preventing you from serving Hashem. So you would think that it's justified to feel sad because, oh, these thoughts are preventing me from serving Hashem. Like I'm serving Hashem now. Like I'm not going shopping. I'm not involved in my mundane work and activities. I'm serving Hashem. Wow, that's a reason for sadness. And then the Alter Rebbe says, no, you should actually be b'simcha because now you know that your efforts are very worthwhile because the Yetzer Hara is intensifying its efforts as well. When we notice the Yetzer Hara intensifying its efforts, that is a sign for us to know that our efforts are also being are working.
I have a question. Because I've been very distracted this morning during davening and also a little bit now. Because I'm trying, tonight's my brother's yard site, and there, I'm trying to bring about some shalom bias in my family that we could all be together somehow tonight. And somebody's trying to split us like in two. And so I was like distracted by how am I going to try to bring some shalom bias, which that is that like considered to be a holy pursuit? Is it okay for me to be thinking about that? Like I was davening for it, but then I was also distracted by how practically, what can I do to make that happen?
Right. So isn't that interesting? Because sometimes the thoughts that come into our mind are thoughts of a mitzvah, thoughts
Right.
of kedusha, like, oh, maybe don't think about your davening, think about how you can do a mitzvah right now, right? That's how the Yetzer Hara starts. The Yetzer Hara starts by, he's smart. The Yetzer Hara starts by telling you to do something good. Once you are in his hands, then he could slowly tell you to do the bad thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So anytime that that happens and you're like, oh my gosh, should I be concentrating on davening or should I be concentrating on resolving the mitzvah? Well, if you're davening, you should be davening. So you know that that's not what you should be thinking about at that point. You can always think about it after davening. But besides for that, without knowing the specifics of your situation, it's always good to remember to stay in your lane and only control what you can control. We have the inclination to think we can control everything and everybody, and the Yetzer Hara makes us think that, like, yes, put in so much effort because you can change this. You can make everything good again. And really, we can't, because we cannot change other people. We can only change ourselves.
That's so true. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Thank
So
you very
stay,
much.
so the solution is to stay in your lane, do what you can, and let Hashem do the rest, and ask Hashem for help.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm really loving how this chapter is being so practical. I think everybody can relate and has practical ramifications in everybody's lives. So is there anybody else before we finish the class? Okay, so next week there will not be a class because it is Purim, but the week after that we will continue Mitzvah Hashem. Freilich Purim, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.